Part 1. The Awakening and the Ego. If this found you, it isn't an accident. It is a signal. It means the life you have been living, the frantic chase for validation, the performative identity, the endless need to fit into a world that feels increasingly hollow, has reached its breaking point. You are tired of being a puppet to your own unconscious. You are finally ready to ask the question, who am I? Beneath the mask. This is the doorway to your awakening, and your guide is Carl Jung, the man who mapped the uncharted depths of the human soul. Jung understood a truth modern culture ignores. The goal of life is not to be happy, popular, or safe. The goal of life is to become whole. To begin, you must destroy a comfortable lie. You are not your ego. The ego is merely the manager of your conscious mind. It is the voice that says, I am good. I am a victim. I am successful. It is an island. Surrounding it is a vast, uncharted ocean, what Jung called the self. The self is your totality. It holds your buried traumas, your dormant genius, and your connection to the human story. Awakening begins when you step back from the ego and realize you are not the character. You are the observer. Take a moment to sit with that. If you are not the thoughts in your head, and you are not the emotions in your chest, what are you? You are the awareness that sees them. You are the quiet space behind the noise. Most people spend their entire lives trapped inside the ego. They believe the story their mind tells them. They believe they are their job. They believe they are their relationship status. They believe they are their bank account. They believe they are their traumas. But these are just costumes. They are temporary identities that will dissolve the moment you stop identifying with them. When the ego becomes too rigid, it starts to fight for survival. If you identify as a good person, the ego will be terrified of being seen as bad. So it projects an image of kindness, even when you are secretly seething with resentment. If you identify as a victim, the ego will unconsciously seek out situations where you are mistreated, just to prove that your identity is real. The ego loves conflict. It loves drama. It loves to be right. But the ego is not your true self. The true self is the one watching the drama unfold. In Psychological Types, Jung showed how we fracture ourselves. We lean into our strengths, our intellect, our charm, our logic, and we abandon the rest. But for every function you perfect, its opposite rots in the dark. The brilliant thinker becomes emotionally volatile, breaking down over small rejections. The empathetic feeler makes chaotic, irrational choices under stress. The successful performer secretly despises solitude. Why does this happen? Because when you build your identity entirely on one function, you lose touch with the rest of your psyche. Your soul is like a wheel with only one spoke. It spins perfectly in one direction, but it cannot bear the weight of a full turn. The intellect is a wonderful tool, but it is a terrible master. If you live entirely in your head, you become disconnected from your body, your instincts, and your emotional reality. You begin to feel like a ghost trapped in a machine. On the other hand, if you live entirely in your emotions, you become a leaf blown by every wind. You are easily manipulated by anyone who knows how to tug at your heartstrings. You make decisions based on temporary feelings, and then you suffer the consequences of your impulsiveness. Wholeness does not come from polishing your strengths. It comes from descending into what you have neglected. This brings us to the core of Jung's work. He did not want you to be a perfect human being. He wanted you to be a complete one. And completeness is not comfortable. It requires you to look at the parts of yourself that you have spent a lifetime hiding. Jung called this individuation, the painful, solitary process of unspooling who you were told to be, so you can become who you actually are. Imagine you are an actor who has been playing a role for 30 years. You have memorized the script. You know exactly how to smile when you are sad, and how to nod when you disagree. You are so good at playing this role that you have forgotten that you are actually the actor underneath. Individuation is taking off the costume. It is looking in the mirror and asking, "Who am I when I am not performing?" It is not a comfortable journey. It requires you to break the mirrors that society has given you and look into the raw, cracked glass of your own soul. Many people begin this journey because they are suffering. They are in the middle of a midlife crisis. They have lost a job they hated anyway. They have ended a relationship that was draining them. They have experienced a profound loss, and in that moment of brokenness, they finally see the truth. The life they were living was not their life. It was a life that was handed to them by their parents, their teachers, their peers, and their society. When you realize this, you are standing at the edge of a great precipice. You can step back and cling to the old, comfortable lies, or you can step forward and fall into the unknown. If you choose to step forward, the first thing you will encounter is the shadow. Part 2. The shadow and the collective unconscious. And to do that, you must face the shadow. The shadow is everything you refuse to see in yourself. Your suppressed rage, unacknowledged greed, hidden envy. The shadow is the opposite of the persona. The persona is the mask you present to the world, the generous, polite, competent version of yourself. The shadow is the messy, chaotic, shameful reality underneath. You project it onto the world every day. You despise the arrogant coworker because you secretly crave power. You judge the volatile person because you fear your own passion. You point your finger at the greedy politician because you cannot accept the small, everyday greed inside your own heart. The act of projection is the mind's defense mechanism. It takes the unacceptable parts of your psyche and places them onto other people. This way, you don't have to deal with them. You can feel superior, righteous, and pure, while the bad people carry the burden of your shadow. But the shadow does not disappear just because you deny it. It grows stronger in the dark. It feeds on repression. And when it has grown too strong, it bursts out. You see, the mind is a master of disguise. It will make you believe that the hatred you feel belongs to others. But Jung warned us, if you do not integrate your darkness, it will consume you. It will burst out in moments of weakness, ruining your relationships and sabotaging your life. Think of the calm, quiet man who one day snaps and commits an act of shocking violence. Where did that violence come from? It was not an accident. It was his shadow, neglected for decades, exploding into the light. Think of the devoted housewife who suddenly walks away from her family, leaving nothing but a note. What drove her? It was the suppressed yearning for freedom, the hidden anger at her role that eventually reached a breaking point. The shadow is not something you can beat. You cannot simply repress it harder. The shadow is part of you. It is a shadow, just as your ego is the light. A shadow exists because there is a light. The more you try to be pure, the darker your shadow becomes. Yet the shadow is not trash. It is buried treasure. It contains the raw, untamed vitality. You locked away to be accepted. When you were a child, you were naturally expressive. You laughed loudly. You cried freely. You danced without caring who was watching. But your parents, your teachers, and your society taught you to stop. They told you, be quiet. Don't be selfish. Don't be angry. Act appropriately. Every time you were told to stop being something, that something was pushed down into the shadow. Your natural anger became suppressed rage. Your natural egoism became hidden greed. Your natural chaos became buried anxiety. But here is the secret. That raw energy is your fuel. Your rage contains the power to defend yourself. Your greed contains the drive to achieve. Your chaos contains the spark of creativity. When you integrate your shadow, you cease to be a fragile victim of your impulses. You become whole. Dangerous to those who wish to manipulate you, but entirely at peace with yourself. This is why the awakened person is so disarming. They do not have a mask. They do not have hidden agendas. They have faced the worst parts of themselves, accepted them, and woven them into their identity. They are not afraid of their anger, so they do not explode. They are not afraid of their desire, so they are not controlled by it. Beneath the shadow lies an even older realm, the collective unconscious, the shared psychic inheritance of humanity. The personal unconscious is like your own private attic. It holds your memories, your traumas, and your suppressed emotions. But underneath that attic lies a vast, ancient ocean that belongs to every human being who has ever lived. Jung called this the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is not something you learn. It is something you inherit. It is the biological blueprint of the human race. It is the reason why every culture on earth has myths about a great flood, a hero's journey, a forbidden tree, or descent into the underworld. These stories are not coincidences. They are expressions of deeply embedded archetypes. It speaks through archetypes. Archetypes are universal symbols. They are the original patterns of human experience. The persona, the mask you wear for society, the hero, the drive to overcome adversity, the anima and animus, the inner opposite gender soul force, within us all. The most powerful archetype that influences your daily life is the anima, for men, and the animus, for women. This is the unconscious opposite gender complex within your psyche. When you fall madly in love, you're often projecting this inner counterpart onto a stranger. You are looking for the missing piece of your soul in someone else's eyes. This is why romantic relationships are so often catastrophic. You meet someone. They seem perfect. They seem to complete you. But over time, the projection begins to fade. You start to see their flaws. You realize that they do not actually have the qualities you projected onto them. And you become disappointed, angry, or resentful. But true maturity requires pulling that projection back. You do not find your other half. You build it inside yourself. The awakened person does not need another person to make them feel complete. They have already integrated their own inner feminine or masculine. They relate to others not out of need, but out of genuine connection. They are whole, and they seek others who are also on the path to wholeness. Part 3. Active Imagination, Alchemy, and the Final Choice. Accessing these depths requires active imagination, a technique Jung developed to dream while awake. You do not force the mind. You listen to it. You step into the quiet, face the images of your unconscious, and ask, "What are you trying to tell me?" In modern society, we are terrified of silence. We distract ourselves with phones, social media, television, and constant noise. We do this because we are afraid of what we might find when we quiet our minds. Jung discovered that if you can sit in a state of relaxed awareness, the unconscious will begin to speak. It sends up images, feelings, and symbols. This is not madness. It is the language of the soul. Active imagination is the practice of dialoguing with these images. If you see a dark figure in your mind's eye, you do not run from it. You ask, "Who are you?" You wait for an answer. The answer will not come in words. It will come as a feeling, an image, or a sudden insight. This process is how you heal your deepest wounds. The shadow does not want to attack you. It wants to be recognized. It wants to be integrated. When you speak to it with compassion and curiosity, it transforms. The monster in your dreams becomes a guide. Jung compared this to alchemy, turning the raw lead of your primitive nature into the gold of a fully realized self. The ancient alchemists were not just trying to turn metal into gold. They were describing a psychological process. The base metal is your raw, unrefined psyche, full of anger, fear, and confusion. The philosopher's stone is the self, the indestructible core of your being. The fire in the alchemical furnace is the intense psychological suffering you must endure to transform. In alchemy, there's a stage called the nigredo, which means blackening. This is the phase where everything falls apart. It is the dark night of the soul. It is the divorce, the bankruptcy, the deep depression. Most people panic at the nigredo. They try to claw their way back to the surface, desperate to feel normal again. They seek quick fixes, distractions, and prescription medications to numb the pain. But the wise know that the nigredo is a gift. It is the fire that burns away the impurities of the ego. You cannot become gold without first being dissolved in the acid of your own despair. This is the great work. It is not a weekend retreat. It is the entire rest of your life. It is a continuous, sacred battle against your own ignorance. Most people view spirituality or self-improvement as a destination. They think, if I just read this book or do this retreat or meditate for 30 days, I will finally be fixed. But Jung's philosophy shatters this illusion. The psyche is not a problem to be solved. It is a living, breathing ecosystem that must be continuously tended. The ego wants quick fixes. It wants a checklist. But the self demands a relationship. It requires daily devotion. Every time you face a painful emotion, instead of running from it, you are doing the great work. Every time you sit with your loneliness, instead of scrolling on your phone, you are doing the great work. Every time you admit your mistakes, instead of blaming others, you are doing the great work. It is slow. It is painful. It is unglamorous. But it is the only path to true freedom. When you refuse this work, your psyche rebels. Anxiety, depression, midlife crises. They are not random failures. They are desperate messages from the self, sabotaging your artificial life, to force you toward what is real. If you are feeling stuck, broken, or profoundly lost, understand this. That pain is not your enemy. That pain is your soul knocking on the door, demanding to be let in. The door is locked. The only way to open it is to answer the knock. You must turn toward your pain, not away from it. You must ask it, "What are you trying to teach me?" And when you finally turn toward it, you will realize that the suffering was not a punishment. It was an invitation. It was the call to the great work. An individuated person cannot be swayed by the crowd. They have already faced their own inner trial. They do not seek approval because they know who they are. They do not get offended because they are not attached to their persona. They do not cling to outcomes because they trust the process of their own unfolding. They treat other people with deep compassion, not because they are naive, but because they see the same shadow, the same struggles, and the same dormant, godlike potential in the eyes of every stranger. You cannot unsee this now. You stand at a fork in the road. You can return to the comfortable sleep of the crowd, or you can step into the dark house of your own mind. The dark house is scary. It contains monsters. It contains memories you have suppressed. It contains truths you are not ready to hear. But it also contains the treasure. It contains the gold. It contains your true self. The crowd will try to drag you back. They will whisper, "Come back. It's safe here." But you have already tasted the truth. You know that the crowd is asleep. You know that the safety they offer is just a dream. As Jung famously wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." Look inside. The great work begins now. Part 4. The persona, dreams, and synchronicity. But we must go deeper into the realm of the archetypes, because understanding them is how you reclaim your own mind. The persona is the mask you wear for society. It is the version of you that you show to your boss, your parents, and strangers. It is not a lie. It is a necessary function. You need a persona to function in the world. You cannot walk into a job interview and show the interviewer your raw, unfiltered shadow. They would call security. However, the danger lies in forgetting that the mask is just a mask. If you become so attached to your persona that you believe it is your true identity, you become a hollow shell. You begin to live your life for the audience, constantly checking if you are performing correctly. You're exhausted because you are constantly acting. The person under the mask, the real person, starves of attention they're constantly giving to their fake, outer image. When you drop the persona, you are left with nothing but raw vulnerability. And that is terrifying. But that vulnerability is exactly where the power is. When you can stand in front of another human being without your armor, and they see you, and they don't run away. That is when true connection happens. And then, there is the hero. The hero is the archetype of overcoming. It is the part of you that fights, that conquers, that pushes through the obstacle to achieve greatness. We are obsessed with the hero in modern cinema because we are deeply disconnected from our own heroic journey. We watch heroes on screen to feel a sense of victory that we are not finding in our own lives. But the hero archetype is a trap if you follow it blindly. The hero's journey is endless. There is always another monster to fight, another mountain to climb. If you live only as the hero, you will never give yourself permission to rest. You will end up burned out because you believe your worth comes solely from your achievements. You become a slave to success. The ultimate goal of the hero's journey is not to keep fighting forever. It is to defeat the final monster, which is the ego itself, and return to the self. When the hero realizes that fighting is not the answer, they attain a higher wisdom. They realize that you cannot kill your shadow. You must befriend it. Now, let us discuss the most misunderstood of all archetypes, the Anima and the Animus. This is the inner opposite gender soul force within us all. For a man, the Anima is his inner feminine. It is the embodiment of feeling, intuition, sensitivity, and relationship. Because men are heavily conditioned by society to suppress their emotions and be tough, their anima is often deeply buried. Consequently, it comes out in unpredictable, volatile ways. This is why a seemingly strong, stone-cold man can suddenly fall into a deep depression or become inexplicably irritable. He is being haunted by his neglected anima. How does this play out in relationships? A man meets a woman who represents his projected anima. She seems mystical, emotional, and deep. He falls madly in love. But once they are together, he tries to control her, suppress her, or make her fit into his logical world. And when she rebels against his control, he feels betrayed, not realizing that he is actually fighting his own inner feminine. For a woman, the animus is her inner masculine. It is the embodiment of logic, assertiveness, courage, and objectivity. A woman with a repressed animus might find herself attracted to arrogant, overbearing men, allowing them to dominate her life because she cannot integrate her own power. Or she might become aggressive and overly critical, projecting her undeveloped masculine edge onto the world. When you fall madly in love, you are often projecting this inner counterpart onto a stranger. You're looking for the missing piece of your soul in someone else's eyes. But true maturity requires pulling that projection back. You do not find your other half. You build it inside yourself. This is the task of the second half of life. If the first half of life is about building your ego and finding your place in society, the second half is about finding your soul. And finding your soul means integrating your inner opposite. When a man successfully integrates his anima, he becomes a force of nature. He is still strong, but he is also deeply empathetic. He understands his own heart. He can nurture others without feeling weak. When a woman successfully integrates her animus, she becomes unshakable. She has a brilliant, sharp mind, but she uses it to protect herself and others, rather than to attack or judge. She does not need a man to lead her. She leads herself, but she welcomes partnership as a choice, not a necessity. This integration is not a distant spiritual fantasy. It is the raw, living work of your everyday life. But how do you access these depths when you are awake? You look to your dreams. Jung believed that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. They are not random, meaningless firing of neurons. They are letters written by your deeper self, delivered to your conscious mind every night. If you ignore them, you are ignoring a vital part of your own guidance system. Imagine you are dreaming of falling. This is not a prophecy of doom. It is your unconscious telling you that you are holding on too tightly to a life that is no longer working. You are afraid to let go, but the fall is actually the release you need. Imagine you are dreaming of a house. The house is your psyche. If the house is dark, cluttered, and full of mysterious rooms, you have a lot of repressed material to explore. If the house is bright, spacious, and clean, you are in good psychological health. To truly awaken, you must begin tracking your dreams. Write them down the moment you wake up. Do not try to analyze them with logic. Instead, feel the emotions they leave behind. Ask yourself, what in my waking life feels like this? And then, there is the strange and mysterious phenomenon that Jung called synchronicity. Synchronicity is the meaningful coincidence. It is when the outside world seems to align perfectly with your inner psychological state. You're thinking about an old friend, and out of nowhere, they call you. You are struggling with a decision, and you see a sign that perfectly answers your inner turmoil. Jung did not believe these were random accidents. He believed they were the outer manifestation of the inner self. When you are living in a state of disconnection from your true self, life feels chaotic and meaningless. But when you align with your deeper purpose, the universe starts to reflect your inner order back to you. The crowd calls these coincidences. The awakened mind calls them confirmation.